The valley was silent, except for the wind whistling through jagged rocks and the distant cries of unseen creatures. No human had dared enter for years. Locals spoke of dragons so fierce that they could burn a forest in minutes. Travelers who tried to cross never returned. The air seemed heavier here, almost as if the valley itself was warning outsiders to stay away. Yarrick stood at the edge, looking down into the deep chasm below. He carried only a small backpack and a portable grill. His heart pounded, but curiosity pushed him forward. He had heard stories of dragons, of fire and scales, of claws that could crush stone. But he also knew that humans had ways to survive where others could not. He had survived harsh deserts and icy mountains. A dragon valley would be no different. As he stepped carefully onto the rocky path, the wind shifted. A shadow passed overhead. Yarrick looked up to see a massive red dragon circling high above. Its wings spread wide, casting a shadow that swallowed the ground beneath. Its eyes glowed like molten lava. Yarrick froze, remembering every story he had ever heard about dragons attacking without mercy. Flames licked the cliffs as the dragon roared, a sound that shook the valley walls. He thought about running, but something stopped him. He had come prepared, and he had a plan, simple but daring. He set down his backpack and pulled out the portable grill. Carefully he lit a small fire. Sparks flew into the air, carrying smoke that twisted into the gray sky. Then he opened his food supply, fresh meat and vegetables carefully prepared. He placed them on the grill. The sizzle and smell of cooking food began to fill the valley. The dragon above paused, circling lower. Its nostrils flared as it sniffed the air. Smoke curled around the rocks, carrying a new, strange aroma. Yarrick's heart raced, but he kept calm. He flipped the meat, adding a pinch of herbs he had brought along. The dragon landed heavily on a cliff, shaking stones loose, but it did not roar this time. Its head tilted, and its eyes focused on the food. Slowly more dragons appeared. A blue one, smaller but equally fierce, landed at the edge of the valley. Yarrick stayed where he was, holding the grill tongs like a shield and a tool at once. He did not speak, did not make sudden moves. The dragon sniffed the air, curiosity mixed with suspicion. One stepped closer, claws clicking against stone. Yarrick offered a piece of meat on the tongs. The dragon hesitated, then gently took it with its jaws. Yarrick exhaled. A tiny victory, but an important one. The dragon chewed carefully, its eyes never leaving him. Slowly, other dragons edged closer, intrigued by the smell of food. Flames that once threatened to engulf anyone who entered now stayed in their mouths, held back by curiosity. Yarrick realized he had discovered something powerful. Dragons had never smelled food prepared with care, and it made them pause. Hours passed and Yarrick continued to cook. The dragons watched, sometimes inching closer, sometimes retreating. He learned their movements, noting how the older, bigger dragons commanded the younger ones to stay back. He understood their hierarchy without a single word spoken. When he tossed a piece of grilled meat toward a young dragon, it jumped but did not run away. It tasted the food and slowly nodded its head as if approving. The valley's mood began to change. What had once been a place of fear now felt strange and calm. The dragons were still powerful and dangerous, but they were no longer immediately hostile. Yarrick smiled faintly. He had not fought them, had not shouted or threatened. He had used patience, skill, and something even more important, food. As night fell, the valley glowed from the firelight of Yarrick's grill. The dragons curled near the cliffs, some resting, others watching. Stars reflected in their eyes, and the scent of roasted meat lingered in the cold air. Yarrick took a small bite of his own cooking, savoring it quietly. He understood that he had crossed into a world no human had tamed before, but tonight, he had made a start. The wind carried distant roars from deeper in the valley, warning that not all dragons were curious or friendly. Yet Yarrick was no longer afraid. He had learned the first secret of the valley: dragons could be stopped, not with weapons but with something they had never known before. Something simple, something human. As he cleaned the grill and packed up, Yarrick looked at the dragons. One, the massive red dragon, lowered its head slightly, a sign he did not fully understand but felt in his chest. A tiny nod of respect, perhaps. The dragons had tested him, and he had passed, not with strength but with calm and ingenuity. Tomorrow he thought he would explore further. There were more dragons, more challenges, and perhaps even more surprises. But tonight he had survived. Tonight, the Forbidden Valley seemed a little less dangerous. The dragons were watching, but they were not attacking. Yarrick lay on a flat rock, looking up at the stars. The valley was no longer silent. It was alive with breaths, movements, and the faint scent of grilled meat lingering in the air. Somewhere deep inside he felt a spark of hope. Perhaps humans could not only survive among dragons but could also find a way to be friends. And that thought made the cold night seem warmer. The morning sun peeked over the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows across the valley. Yarok stirred, feeling the chill of the night fade. Around him, the dragons were already awake. The massive red one stretched its wings, shaking loose the stones beneath it. Smaller dragons moved carefully among the rocks, their eyes alert but not hostile. Yarok yawned and reached for his portable grill. Today he decided he would cook more than just a few pieces of meat. He unpacked fresh supplies, meat, vegetables and herbs he had brought from home. The smell of raw food alone drew curious glances from the dragons. Yarok carefully started the fire, sparks rising into the sky, and then placed the first pieces on the grill. The sizzling sound and the rising aroma seemed to draw the dragons closer. They hovered at the edges, watching his every move. One young blue dragon, smaller than the rest but bold, stepped forward. Its claws clicked against the rocks as it approached. Yarok kept calm. He had learned that sudden movements might frighten them. He held a piece of meat in his hand, offering it to the dragon without a word. The dragon sniffed carefully, then gently took it. Its eyes widened, almost surprised by the taste. Yarok smiled. He realized the dragons were not attacking because of fear, they were curious. Curiosity was stronger than anger today. The red dragon shifted closer, its nostrils flaring at the scent of the roasting food. Flames that once would have shot from its mouth now stayed inside. Yarok understood that the smell of food had a strange power over them. It made them pause, made them think, made them wonder. Hours passed. Yarok cooked carefully, giving each dragon a piece of food. They began to gather near him, watching and waiting. The younger dragons mimicked the older ones, learning that this human was safe. Even the massive red dragon stayed close, observing without a threat. Yarok realized that the dragons were beginning to trust him. Not fully but enough to stay near rather than attack. As the day went on, the valley changed. Dragons that would have roared and burned anything in their path now sat quietly, sniffing the air, waiting for their turn. The smell of grilled meat filled the air and the valley felt different, less dangerous, less wild. Yarok had discovered something important. Dragons could be calmed not with force but with something they had never understood before, human food. The red dragon lowered its head closer to Yarok. Slowly, carefully, it extended its claw. Yarok froze, then gently touched it. The dragon did not strike. Instead, it watched him with glowing eyes as if trying to understand what kind of creature he was. Yarok laughed softly. He had earned the first sign of respect, not with weapons but with patience and care. Other dragons began to join in. They sniffed the air, nibbled at pieces of meat and slowly relaxed. Flames that once would have threatened Yarok now stayed in their mouths. The smell of food had become a shield, stronger than any sword or armor. The dragons began to circle him, not in anger but in curiosity. One small dragon even nudged his leg gently, testing the human further. Yarok realized the valley could be more than a place of fear. It could be a place of understanding. He had crossed the first boundary. The dragons no longer saw him as prey. They saw him as something else, strange, unpredictable but not dangerous. The scent of cooking food had stopped their flames and opened the door to trust. As night fell, Yarok continued to cook. The smell of roasting meat mixed with the cool night air. Dragons of all sizes lay near the cliffs, some resting, some watching him work. The red dragon sat closest, its massive body coiled protectively, yet not threatening. Yarok had never imagined such a thing could happen. The dragons, creatures of fire and fury, were calm because of something as simple as a human meal. He thought about the stories he had heard, of dragons attacking anything that entered their territory. Those stories were true but only in part. The dragons were dangerous, yes, but not mindless. They could be reasoned with, if one understood their nature. And today Yarok had begun to understand. The night grew colder but Yarok did not move from his spot. He watched the stars reflected in the eyes of the dragons and felt a strange warmth. The valley was alive but it was no longer only wild and dangerous. It was curious and cautious, waiting for him to act again. He knew that tomorrow would bring more dragons, more challenges, but he was ready. Somewhere deep in the valley, distant roars echoed, dragons from faraway lands drawn by the smell of food. Yarok smiled to himself. If curiosity and hunger could stop flames, then perhaps humans could find a place among dragons after all. Tonight, he had learned something greater than survival. He had learned that even the fiercest creatures could be reached with patience and understanding. He packed up the grill for the night, leaving small pieces of meat for the dragons nearby. The red dragon lowered its head slightly as if in thanks. The others nudged at the food gently, savoring what they had been given. Yarrick lay down on a flat rock looking up at the sky. He felt a spark of hope. The Forbidden Valley, once a place of terror, was slowly becoming a place where humans and dragons might meet not in battle, but in quiet respect. Tomorrow he would explore further. But tonight he had seen the power of a simple meal, a calm heart and patience. The dragons had not attacked, and that alone was a victory. Yarrick closed his eyes, knowing that the scent of food had stopped the flames at least for now, and had opened the first door toward friendship in a valley that had never known it before. The valley had changed. Where once there was only fear, now there was curiosity. Dragons of all sizes moved carefully among the rocks, some resting, some pacing, but none attacking. Yarrick had learned their patterns and moods. Each day he cooked for them, and each day their trust grew a little more. He had discovered that dragons were not simply wild monsters. They were intelligent, cautious, and aware of the world around them. Yarrick set up his grill early in the morning. The red dragon, the largest in the valley, was already waiting, perched on a high cliff with its wings folded neatly. The smaller dragons gathered below, sniffing the air for the scent of food. Yarrick laid out fresh meat and vegetables, the aroma rising like a banner through the cool morning air. One by one the dragons stepped closer, careful not to provoke a reaction, watching him with eyes full of curiosity. A young green dragon approached first. Its scales shimmered in the sunlight as it sniffed the food. Yarrick held out a piece of meat without fear. The dragon hesitated, then took it gently, chewing slowly. Its eyes widened as if surprised by the taste. Yarrick smiled. This was more than feeding, it was communication. He had learned that dragons understood respect and patience. Force alone would not make them listen, but care could. The red dragon shifted its massive body and landed closer to Yarrick, shaking loose a few stones. Its eyes glowed with intelligence, observing every movement. Yarrick spoke softly, even though he knew the dragon might not understand the words. His tone was calm, steady, reassuring. He offered a piece of meat on the tongs. The dragon sniffed, then gently took it. No fire came from its mouth. No claws struck. Only quiet observation. As days passed, the dragon's behavior changed. They no longer circled in aggression but hovered near him, waiting. They watched him cook, watched him eat, and even seemed to imitate each other in small ways, nuzzling the ground gently, tilting their heads, or tapping at the food. Yarrick realized they were learning from him as much as he was learning from them. He understood their hierarchy. The red dragon led, others followed, and the young ones observed. Yarrick began experimenting with flavors, using different herbs and spices. The dragons reacted differently to each one, some leaning in closer, others stepping back. One small dragon, almost shy, began approaching him more often, nudging his hand gently when he placed a piece of meat nearby. Yarrick laughed softly. He had created a bridge, simple and fragile, between humans and dragons. The scent of food had stopped the flames, but patience had built trust. One afternoon a challenge appeared. A dragon from a distant ridge, black and fierce, flew in. Its wings spread wide, casting a shadow over the valley. The locals' warnings echoed in Yarrick's mind. Dragons attacked intruders without hesitation. But instead of fleeing, Yarrick carried a platter of fresh meat toward the newcomer. The black dragon landed heavily, eyes full of suspicion. It roared, a deep, trembling sound that shook the rocks. Yarrick stayed calm, holding the food out. Slowly the dragon sniffed, then tasted a piece. Its eyes narrowed at first, but as it chewed, the fire in its throat did not ignite. It stepped back, then leaned closer again. The other dragons watched, waiting, sensing the outcome. Yarrick realized that this moment was a turning point. Not all dragons were easy to trust, but none were impossible. The power of patience and care was stronger than fear. By evening, the black dragon had settled near the others, cautious but accepting. The red dragon lowered its head slightly, a sign of approval. Yarrick smiled faintly. He had not only survived in the valley but had begun to earn the dragon's respect. More importantly, he had learned that dragons were capable of understanding humans in ways no one had thought possible. Food had started the process, but trust was building the bond. The valley grew quieter in a peaceful way. Dragons lounged near the cliffs, occasionally sniffing the air or nudging at food. Yarrick continued cooking, each meal a small ceremony, a step further into understanding. He realized that the dragons were not just testing him, they were learning to accept him as part of their world. The valley, once a place of danger, now felt like a classroom where patience and care were the lessons. Night fell, and Yarrick lay near the fire of his grill, looking at the stars. The red dragon curled its massive body nearby, smaller dragons nestling close. He had never imagined such a sight, humans and dragons coexisting peacefully in a valley of legend. The scent of cooking food lingered in the air, mixing with the crisp night breeze. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that trust was growing brick by brick, bite by bite. The distant roars from beyond the valley reminded him that not all dragons knew him yet, but he was ready. Trust could be earned even from the fiercest creatures, if one had patience, courage, and a calm heart. Yarrick understood that this was only the beginning. The dragons had accepted him as a friend, and now the real challenge would be maintaining that trust and exploring the valley further. He watched as the youngest dragons played near the cliffs, wings flapping awkwardly, scales glinting in the firelight. The red dragon observed them silently, a guardian of sorts. Yarrick smiled. He had crossed a threshold. Dragons no longer attacked blindly, they waited, watched, and even learned from him. The valley was still wild, still dangerous, but trust had begun to change its rules. As he drifted to sleep, Yarrick thought about the days ahead. He would continue cooking, continue learning, continue building trust. The dragons had shown him that strength was not only in fire or claws but in patience, kindness, and understanding. He had discovered a way to survive among the dragons and even thrive. A new kind of respect had taken root, and with it, the possibility of a future where humans and dragons could share the valley without fear. Yarrick's heart felt lighter than it had in years. The valley that had once promised only danger now held potential and hope. Dragons of every size lay around him, quiet but watchful, proof that even the fiercest creatures could change if given a reason. And Yarrick knew that reason was not force, not threats, but simple care, patience, and the courage to show respect in a world that had never seen it before. The morning sky was painted in shades of orange and gold as Yarrick prepared his grill. The dragons in the valley moved quietly, some stretching their wings, others nudging each other playfully. The red dragon sat on a high cliff, watching him, while smaller dragons lingered nearby. Yarrick had grown used to their presence, and he moved among them calmly, placing meat and vegetables on the grill. The scent of cooking food began to rise, curling into the cool air. Suddenly, a shadow darkened the valley. Yarrick looked up to see dragons from distant territories approaching. Their wings spread wide, each one larger than any dragon he had seen in the valley. Their eyes glowed with suspicion and power. The local dragons stiffened, some growling softly, others shifting nervously. Yarrick understood immediately that these intruders were not curious. They were challengers, drawn by the smell of food but expecting a fight. He took a deep breath and held up his hands, not in fear but in a calm gesture. He carried a larger platter of food than usual, filled with grilled meat and fresh vegetables. The intruders landed heavily, their claws shaking stones loose. The largest among them, a deep black dragon with silver scales, roared, sending a tremor through the valley. The local dragons circled protectively around Yarrick, but he remained steady, focusing on the grill. Yarrick placed the platter on the ground carefully. Smoke and the aroma of food filled the air, stronger than ever. The black dragon stepped forward, flames flickering in its throat, ready to attack. But when it sniffed the air, its aggressive posture softened slightly. The smell was irresistible. It leaned closer, taking a small piece of meat offered by Yarrick. Its eyes widened in surprise at the taste. Slowly it stepped back and then tried another piece. The other intruders watched, confused by the unexpected behavior. They had expected fear, resistance, maybe even a fight. Instead they were met with patience, calm, and food. One by one they tasted the offerings. The flames that had threatened to consume the valley remained in their mouths. Curiosity and hunger were stronger than aggression, and the dragons began to lower their heads, observing Yarrick without hostility. The red dragon shifted closer to Yarrick, its massive body moving smoothly over the cliff rocks. Smaller dragons nudged against him gently, reassured by his presence. Yarrick realized that he had not only calmed the dragons in his valley but had extended that calm to outsiders as well. The scent of food was a language they understood, a signal that this human was not a threat but a provider, a friend. Hours passed, and the intruders mingled with the local dragons. There was still caution in their eyes, but the aggression faded. Yarrick continued to cook, flipping meat and adding fresh herbs, filling the valley with the smell of roasting food. The dragons learned quickly, moving closer, observing his every gesture. The black dragon, once a fierce challenger, now sat quietly beside the red dragon, tasting food and watching him work. By evening the valley was alive in a new way. Dragons of all sizes rested near the cliffs, some playing gently, others simply observing. The intruders, once aggressive, now accepted the rules of this human's presence. Yarrick understood that strength was not in fire or claws alone, but in calmness, courage, and the willingness to show respect. Food had started the process, but trust was what held it together. The local dragons nudged the newcomers gently, showing them how to behave, how to respect Jarek's space. The black dragon leaned down and took a piece of meat directly from Jarek's hand. The other intruders followed, each testing the human's patience and learning that he did not fear them. Jarek felt a quiet satisfaction. He had survived the challenge from the skies without weapons, without shouting, only through patience and understanding. As night fell, the stars reflected in the dragon's eyes. The valley, once dangerous and forbidden, now felt alive with cautious harmony. Jarek packed up his grill but left small pieces of meat for the dragons to share. The black dragon lowered its head slightly, a gesture that Jarek interpreted as respect. The local dragons curled nearby, and even the intruders settled, their flames kept in check by curiosity and trust. Jarek lay on a flat rock watching the night sky. The wind carried distant roars from dragons far beyond the valley, but he was no longer afraid. The challenge from the skies had shown him that even the fiercest creatures could be calmed when approached with patience and care. The valley had become more than a place of survival. It had become a place of learning, understanding, and unexpected friendship. The youngest dragons played near the firelight, wings flapping awkwardly, scales shimmering. Jarek smiled. He had learned the first rule of interacting with dragons. Strength and fear could not tame them, but patience, calmness, and food could. The intruders had come expecting a fight, but they had found respect instead. The valley had shifted from a battlefield to a place of cautious peace. As he drifted to sleep, Jarek reflected on the day. He had faced the challenge from the skies and survived, not by force, but by offering a reason for the dragons to trust him. Tomorrow he would continue exploring the valley, learning more about these creatures and their ways. But tonight, he had seen proof that humans and dragons could coexist when approached with care, courage, and understanding. The smell of the last pieces of roasted meat lingered in the air, mixing with the cool night breeze. Dragons of all kinds rested nearby, quiet but alert, proof that trust had been earned. Jarek felt a spark of hope deep inside him. The valley, once dangerous and forbidden, now held a promise. A promise that humans and dragons could meet not in fire and fury, but in calm, respect, and shared curiosity. Jarek closed his eyes, knowing that the challenge from the skies had been the ultimate test of patience and courage. The dragons had responded, and he had shown that a human could be more than prey or intruder. They could be allies, friends, even teachers in understanding. Tonight, the valley was alive in a new way, and Jarek felt ready for whatever the next day would bring. The valley was quiet in the early morning, with mist curling around jagged rocks and the first rays of sunlight touching the cliffs. Dragons of all sizes moved slowly, stretching their wings, sniffing the air, and watching the valley around them. Jarek carried his grill toward a flat stone, setting it down carefully. Today he thought would be a day to celebrate. He had earned the trust of the dragons, and now the valley was ready for something new: peace. He unpacked fresh food, arranging meat, vegetables, and herbs neatly on the grill. The smell rose immediately, twisting into the air and reaching even the highest cliffs. The dragons noticed at once. The red dragon, perched above, lowered its head, and the smaller ones gathered near Jarek, waiting for their share. Even the black dragon from the distant ridge, once so fierce, approached calmly. It had learned that this human meant no harm. Jarek began cooking carefully, flipping meat and adding spices. The dragons watched every movement, their eyes curious and respectful. Some nudged each other, learning how to approach without startling him. Others simply sniffed the air, taking in the new smells. The valley had changed from a place of danger to a place of wonder. Flames that had once burned anyone who entered now rested quietly in the dragons' throats, controlled by curiosity and trust. As the day passed, more dragons arrived. They came not to attack but to taste the food, drawn by the smell and by the calm authority of Jarek. The valley became crowded with scales and wings, yet there was no fear, no aggression. The dragons moved carefully, communicating with each other in ways Jarek could not fully understand, but their gestures were clear: respect for the human who had tamed the valley not with force, but with patience and care. Jarek laughed softly as a young green dragon nudged his hand, trying to get more food. He gave it a small piece and the dragon's eyes shone with joy. The red dragon lowered itself beside him, massive wings folding neatly as it watched the smaller dragons eat. Jarek realized that the dragons were not only accepting him, they were beginning to accept each other as well. Rivalries were set aside when food and calm presents were offered. He continued cooking into the evening. The aroma of roasted meat and vegetables filled the valley completely, mixing with the cool breeze. Dragons of all colors and sizes lounged nearby, some resting on cliffs, others gently nudging each other or tasting food. The black dragon from the ridge curled near the red dragon, side by side, a silent sign that previous hostility had faded. The valley, once a place of attacks and fear, now felt alive with quiet companionship. As night approached, Yarrick built a small fire beside the grill. He left extra food out for the dragons to share. One by one they settled near the fire, the youngest dragons curling up close to the older ones for warmth. The red dragon nudged a smaller one gently, guiding it toward the food. Yarrick realized that the dragons were learning more than trust. They were learning cooperation. His simple meals had taught them patience, respect, and the value of shared calm. Yarrick sat quietly, watching the stars reflected in the dragon's eyes. The valley had transformed completely. Where there had been danger, there was now companionship. Where there had been fire and fury, there was curiosity and calm. He understood that humans and dragons had found a way to coexist, not through dominance or fear, but through respect and understanding. The scent of food had stopped flames, but trust had forged peace. Suddenly, a distant roar echoed through the valley. Dragons from faraway lands had come, drawn by the smell of food and the promise of calm. The local dragons did not panic. Instead, they welcomed the newcomers cautiously, showing them how to approach without aggression. Yarrick added more food to the grill, and the valley filled with sizzling sounds and mouth-watering smells. One by one, the new dragons tasted the offerings, their fiery tempers softened by hunger and curiosity. The red dragon shifted closer to Yarrick, resting its massive head near him. The black dragon settled beside it, and smaller dragons clustered together, forming a circle around the human and the fire. Yarrick felt a quiet satisfaction. He had achieved something no one had thought possible, a valley of dragons tamed not by strength, but by patience, courage, and simple care. The fire in their throats was now controlled, the valley safe for any who entered. As night fell completely, the dragons rested, some sleeping, others watching the sky. Yarrick packed up his grill, leaving extra food scattered near the fire. He looked around the valley and saw dragons of all shapes and sizes coexisting peacefully. The red dragon let out a low rumble, a sound Yarrick interpreted as gratitude. The younger dragons played quietly, safe in the presence of their elders. The valley had become a place of learning, respect, and shared calm. Yarrick lay down on a flat rock, staring at the stars. He felt a deep sense of hope. The Forbidden Valley, once deadly and feared, was now a home for friendship and understanding. Dragons had learned that humans could be more than intruders, they could be allies, guides, and providers. And humans, in turn, had learned the value of patience, courage, and respect for creatures far stronger than themselves. The night air was cool, and the scent of roasted meat lingered. Dragons of all kinds curled around each other and near the fire, proof that trust had grown into peace. Yarrick knew this was only the beginning. The valley would continue to be wild, but it would never again be only a place of danger. Now it was a place where humans and dragons could meet, learn, and live together. Yarrick closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the fire and the calm presence of dragons surrounding him. He had shown that strength and fear were not the only ways to survive. Patience, care, and courage could change even the fiercest hearts. The valley had become a symbol of what was possible when humans and dragons respected each other. Tonight, Yarrick smiled, knowing that peace had been forged in smoke, patience, and understanding, and that the dragons would never see humans the same way again. The stars shone above, the valley was quiet, and the dragons slept nearby, breathing slowly and calmly. Yarrick lay there, knowing he had changed their world. He had crossed boundaries that no human had before, and in doing so, he had proven that friendship, respect, and courage were stronger than fire. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dragons, and new adventures, but tonight, the valley was at peace, and that was enough.